So Sphinx, of course, was in the late 80s, and so I rolled back again to the late 70s when I was doing my research at MIT on text-to-speech synthesis. And the remarkable thing to me at the time was that by engineering these systems according to linguistic work, we could actually build machines that do unrestricted text-to-speech. So I said one day to my advisor, John Allen, which you may remember and recall, I want to build a machine that one can speak into it and it comes out in another language. And of course, I'm known for vastly underestimate the time that it takes to do a task. Um, he just was polite enough and encouraging enough that he says, okay, that's great, Alex, but let's build a speech synthesis first. And so I went back to my office to do that. But in 78 and 79, this was a dream that stuck. And when the project came to an end, I said, well, what's next? What should I do? If we really do want to realize a dream like that, we need ASR, we need machine translation, we need TTS, and we need this in multiple languages. So a lot of things to do. Everybody at the time thought machine translation was impossible, AI complete. And so I asked, who's doing ASR? And then there's this guy, Raj Reddy in Pittsburgh, who is the guru of speech recognition. You should meet him. And there was this wonderful conference, some of you may recall. I think there are some wonderful papers by Jim Baker, stochastic language processing is here. We're going to have that digitized, by the way, by the library, because it's a gem. I cannot find it online. And it's just a remarkable book, very unique, where there's a lot of seminal papers in there. So I met Raj at that conference, and he invited me to come visit, and I made a trip to Pittsburgh. Everyone warned me it was an awful city, but I came, and it was actually a beautiful day. That you come out of the tunnel and you see this wonderful city, and I meet Raj, and to interview, see, well, maybe I should work here. And Raj responded, can you stay and get started right now? I said, well, can I fly back to Boston and pack my bags at least, etc. And so we did. So I became a graduate student with Raj, and it was a genuinely enjoyable, exciting, and a demanding experience all at the same time. I really admired his vision and his energy. And it became essentially, again, something that I pass on now to students, I hope, as much as I can. But there were, of course, many funny stories that you know. Raj Reddy, half ready, and the full ready. You know, many of you know that. That's the famous hug, which means either a week work or a month work. And then there's a Raj way. What I call the Raj hallway U-turn is my office door was always open. Raj would walk by, and I could know without a fail. 5 seconds later, he'd show up at my door because he would come by, see me, and says, "Oh, I gotta tell Alex to do this," and so I would get another month of work on my desk, and then the famous things he says: "Proof to the pudding is in the eating. Make it real. It doesn't matter if it's just a pipe dream." But my days in Pittsburgh had also other adventures, like I loved skydiving. So every time I would go to a conference, I pack my parachute and make some skydiving things in Florida. And then eventually Raj found out that I was up to this kind of side stuff. I was getting my pilot license, jumping out of airplanes. So he didn't really quite like that because A, it distracted me from my work, and B, it could kill me, right? And so he says, we should have an insurance for the speech group if you kill yourself, and it should be $50,000 that would go to. So I now know my worth in life as defined by Raj. So anyway, my research then was template matching, and the day after the Harpy and hearsay things, we went back to acoustics and we tried to optimize this. Itakura in Japan had some wonderful results, and I worked with Roberto Biziani to make that fast. The famous ESET was drilled into my head because it was one of those really hard acoustic things, BDE, PTC, ZVG. Still can recount it. I recorded this yesterday. And then we looked at how does this all connect with speech understanding, and studied the hearsay and Harpy system. And you look at something like this, you know, we were a year ago, and you see how hard this problem is. How can you write rules in this? And it's also continues in the flow. We need to really think about the trajectories of this. We can't really just So I came up with a list of things that speech systems would have to have. And I think the most striking one to me is always the compositionality, because compositionality, speech, unlike other AI problems, decomposes in all these sub things, and you have to optimize them all in order to make it work. So I came up with this list. It needs to learn representations. It's too complex to program. Need to model uncertainty. No knowledge source is perfect. Need to integrate all levels. Needs independence from segmentation. Need to optimize components based on a global loss function. So there was two really models that seemed to do this, HMMs. But what I didn't like about HMMs is speech really Markovian? There is nothing more un-Markovian as speech. And so it didn't, but Kai-Fu and I, we were good friends, and we worked on this a little bit underground on these statistical systems. And then Jeff Hinton came around at Carnegie Mellon, and I just immediately was enthusiastic. We knew, of course, the limitations of the perceptrons, and he introduced me to backpropagation. I said, backpropagation, that's it, because it's a hidden representation. That is the most exciting thing about this. And so I went on this to do this, but there were issues. I said to Jeff, look, this will never work as long as we need some pre-segmentation. We need freedom from segmentation. So we had a researcher, Shikano, visiting at the time. He went and started this new laboratory in Japan, so went off to Japan to try to build this new model of neural networks in shift invariant situations, and we came up with this time delay neural network. In '87, we wrote the first paper together. I still have maintained communication with Jeff, and we also had a student jointly at CMU working on English version. My version was on Japanese data, and we managed to make it shift invariant, which was arguably the first convolutional neural network ever built, and it was done for speech recognition over time. We had big improvements. We found fascinating internal abstractions that we could see. We proved that it was shift invariant because we got the same results by shifting it. And we did some transfer learning by taking out the representations and plugging them into other tasks, which was, to me, fascinating you could do because we never trained it to do that. Here we could read, for example, it was doing format tracking and segmentation internally, all stuff we didn't have to tell it to do. It learned it internally. We also built two-dimensional TDNNs, which you see here for frequency invariance, and then later this was then adopted by the vision community, and hence the name convolutional neural networks, and this is all actually referenced in the appropriate papers. Now, one thing we needed to do is put in some kind of search thing so that we have a sequence of phonemes that could build words. So we introduced the search. Today, you would do this by attention, by an encoder-decoder, but we had a DTW algorithm we put into this neural network, and lo and behold, we could actually do, oops, can we play this? On where? Oh boy. What's that? Double click where? Which one do you want? This one, right there. Yep. So this was 1993, TDNN.
MEYER.
So we built a little for a German company, for one of the early navigation systems. We'll build a continuous spelling recognizer for navigation in cities. And this was all real-time, fast, high accuracy. For 93 was actually quite astonishing. We could get these kinds of performance.
WAIBEL.
Okay.
FELDMANN.
There was one mistake, but...
FELDMANN.
Okay.
THOMAS.
Okay, and so on. And we did the same with a handwriting recognition, worked equally well. We had to actually build little, there was no tablets, no iPhone, so we had to actually do this. So in the 80s, 90s, it was a lonely road to be in neural networks. 90% of the community did HMMs. There was little funding. Speech researchers called us neural nuts. At Arden House, people said publicly, that's unscientific what you do, double ouch. At NIST, people said DARPA's wasteful detour with neural networks. I said, no. And then someone else said it will never work unless it does maximum likelihood. At ICAS, someone said mathematically proven that only one hidden layer is enough and you should never do more than one layer. And I said, I don't know. Neural nets require too much computation. That's the only thing that I thought was true. And at DARPA, some people said it's no better than K nearest neighbor. Some of my colleagues who now works at Google and admits that that was definitely not the case. He says, I can do that as well with LVQ because a nonlinear recognizer or classifier really does do as well for a static problem. But my point always was, look, it's about the hidden knowledge we learn with these things, not necessarily about the classifier in ideal conditions. And that actually, as we all know, proved true. But how do you survive at the days? Back, I went to a wisdom I learned from Raj. It's better to work on a problem in search of a solution than on a solution in search of a problem. So rather than getting frustrated about the state of affairs, I said, let's go back to my idea with the speech translator. You know, it doesn't really matter ultimately if you want to connect the word by language, whether it's by neural or statistics. But we proceeded with the neural network systems, but we went and built useful systems, damn the torpedoes. So I built a research network between Carnegie Mellon, Karlsruhe, and ATR. And here we are, built in 1991, the first speech translation system in a conference that was broadcasted by CNN and so on. And it took us another 10, 20 years to come up with a company that marketed this as an app on the App Store, very successful, and was eventually acquired by Facebook. We went on to do other things, like do first emotion recognition with neural networks in speech.
Go to sleep.
So, okay. And various vision things. I don't know if that, well, can't see it. But we could do focus of attention tracking and pointing and so on, which we all put in there. Now, computing helped, as you all know. Initially, in the before 2010, we just eked out always a little bit better than other methods in neural networks, but it was so painfully slow to train these that the community ignored it. And as you all know, it took another 10, 20 years to see the enormous gains we get with neural nets. And of course, finally, we ignored the mathematicians and really did go to more than one hidden layer, which we all now really worked well. TNNs went back and were back used, and we went on this wonderful DARPA speech task switchboard, which we started in '93. And lo and behold, we got this now down to human performance at low latency, and the machine translation also improved, so that we can now build, we built 2012, a automatic simultaneous interpreting system, which was introduced in Karlsruhe for foreign students, and is still a service that runs. And a spin-off company from that was recently acquired by Zoom. So if you look at the subtitles and translation in Zoom, you know where it comes from. And from that, I would like to say thank you again for Raj for all the wisdoms, because it's ultimately not just what we do, but also how we do it and with what vision and imagination we do it, that guides us through also rough spots that invariably happen when you try to do something really unusual. Thank you.